Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Hi, it's Dr. Liz Jenkins with drlizcoaching.com. And welcome to day 10, where we're going to talk about the fifth and final conflict skills that we're going to be covering over the rest of the 30 days. And this one I call ice and frozen. And really, what it is when some folks, when they are in the midst of conflict or facing some adversarial potential perceived, they get flooded. And when they get flooded, they get overwhelmed and they actually freeze or shut down or check out, so to speak. Now, the other day we were talking about the fire people that tend to escalate when they are physiologically overwhelmed. And for these folks, the ice folks, they go through a very similar process. There's a perceived threat and they go to the fight, flight, or freeze. And they run more to the flight and freeze part of this dynamic. Again, their logical reasoning tends to shut down, and we go back to more of the primitive part of our brain, which has us frozen, overwhelmed, at a loss for words, unable to even sometimes call a timeout or find their voice. And many of them say, I can't find my voice. I can feel my heart in my throat. And they literally shut down. And sometimes it may look on the outside like they're being disrespectful because you're having this conversation, and the more you talk, the quieter they get. All right. They may sit down, they may look down, they may cross their arms and kind of shrink into themselves. They may actually just get up and walk out of the room or go down the hall and you find them in the bathroom, or some go outside in the backyard. Some leave the house, literally get in their car, go for a walk, whatever, without a word, without a word. And so if you're not aware of this conflict style and the fact that your partner or spouse is in overwhelm, or you personally are not aware that this is how conflict shows up and how you look on the outside, then we're going to oftentimes, without realizing it, stimulate and agitate the conflict even more. Especially when we do things like calming things like grab our phones and look in it and scroll, and we're trying to get collected, but it's not, the other person doesn't know. The other person doesn't realize it. So we're going to talk about if you're one of the ice or if you were one of the fire people, how we come up with one, identifying it, and two, having very effective strategies so that each of us recognize what's going on in that moment, that maybe we can anticipate before we get into the overwhelm, before we get into the place where our brain, the logical reasoning part of us, has shut down, that we call the timeout and we have a plan in place to let people go to, whether they're in the moment or go to separate places where we can de-escalate, get our physiology back under control, where we're breathing properly, where we can start hearing and processing. And so I want you to start thinking about, do you or does your partner show up that way in a conflict? Okay. If it's you, that's great. That's wonderful. Tagged. We got it. I want you to be really start thinking about how soon into this process of this conflict, how soon into this discussion, this disagreement, do you start feeling yourself shutting down or drifting away or at a loss for words? Because that's going to be really helpful to share as we start going on so that we can get ahead of that and have the strategy in place. Now, you on the receiving end of maybe your partner or your spouse is the ice person. I want you to think back to maybe the last few conflicts you had. And if you step back now when you're calmer, What did that start looking like? When did you start getting those? When did it start escalating you to watching them not participate in the conversation, not talk, have an opinion? Maybe there's like, and you weren't getting the answers, you weren't processing, you weren't okay, that you weren't. And sometimes fire folks pursue and persist, and without realizing it, push that overwhelm faster than if we had a step back. And so we're going to talk about that, about how each of you show up and how you either support an effective conflict resolution strategy, or how without realizing it, you have inadvertently made it worse or escalated it to the point where neither of you are getting the satisfaction, the acknowledgement, the respect, the conversation, the agree to disagree. We're not getting that, and we push it under the rug. All right. So I hope that's been helpful for you today. Remember, we've got the criticism judging, we've got the defensiveness and the explaining, we've got contempt with disregard. We have the fire folks, they're fast, hot escalation. And we have the icy, the frozen, the overwhelmed, the flooded, the disengaging, right? So think about which one of those, they all or a few, write them down, because we're going to start reviewing them and talking about strategies so that you guys can successfully manage your style and their style and resolve these conflicts. Okay? Take care. Talk to you later. If you'd like more information now about my Reignite, it's a couples connection class program where we meet for 8 weeks, all online. And then there's all sorts of activities and videos and more of this that goes onto it. DM me, reach out to me, and just mention, Reignite. Okay? I'll put a heart in there and I'll follow up with you. Take care. Bye-bye.